that would be great. But my name's Brianna. I'm the Volunteer Engagement Manager at Venture to Impact. And before I introduce our speaker, a couple other housekeeping. If you have any questions throughout our session, if you'll just drop them in the chat, I'll be monitoring that so I can let you know whether we're going to get to that later. And if not, we'll hopefully answer them at the end of our time together. If you have the workbook that I emailed to you yesterday available to you, that might be nice to take some notes on as we're going, but I'll also put that in the chat momentarily so that you can make use of that as we go. I'm also going to put a survey in the chat at the end of our time together, and it would be great if you could give us your feedback. It'll take 2 minutes, just I think 12 questions, so that we can improve our offerings for you. So you'll do that at the end. Yes, so here with me today is Tracy Flitcraft. She's been volunteering with us at Venture to Impact since 2015, and she works as a senior solutions consultant at Lev, specializing in Salesforce marketing cloud products and tools. She's worked with many enterprise companies, including Nike, Microsoft, Volkswagen, and IKEA, to help them achieve their marketing goals through strategic planning and process. However, her passion lies in working with smaller organizations or teams to understand the big wide world of marketing is quite simple. And once you define your message and target audience, you can take on the world and make it smaller. Strategy is often a word used to lump abstract concepts and tactics into unactionable discussions. So Tracy likes to dissect these tactics and find a way to make them actionable so that organizations can go beyond just talking about their mission and start delivering on it. Without any further ado, over to Tracy.
Thanks. That was a great intro. I appreciate it. And I'm really excited to be here today. I'm in Portland, Oregon, so it's a little bit early and the skies are still a little bit dark. So if you see a blue haze, it's because I'm sitting in front of a window and it's still a little too dark to show good daylight lighting. So I apologize about that, but I hope the content will distract from the visual of my office and my face. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to share my screen. And you should have all received a V2I Guide to Strategic Planning workbook. And if you have that, go ahead and open it up and have it on your screen or in the background so that you could flip to it. I'll reference it quite a bit. And so it'd be helpful if you're able to look at it and see what I'm talking about as I go through some of these concepts and topics. Is there a question? No feedback? Okay. So as Brianna said, today we're going to go through what is strategic planning and how can you do it in a way that's actionable. I'm hoping to deliver a couple things: best practices for creating and executing your plan, elements of an effective strategy plan, and then some tools to help you execute your plan. The tools are just a few of the many that are out there, so we'll go through them. And I don't want you to get set on the ones that we're showing you, but give you an idea of what you should be looking for as you search the big wide world of strategic planning. So let's define what is strategic planning. It's a highly collaborative process to create a tool that helps you focus on key priority and enables you to make decisions over the next few years while also adapting to new conditions and opportunities that arise. So if all of you had a strategy plan prior to going into the pandemic, you might have had to revisit it and make accommodations for how to work in a world with COVID-19, how to work in a world where everyone's quarantining. So a strategic plan is something that you can create, knowing that it's going to change over the course of months or years, and it's going to be a live document that's always going to be evolving. So what should your strategic plan answer? You should be able to go through these questions as you are building out your strategic plan and be able to answer these 5 questions that I have on here. For what impact and for whom do we hold ourselves accountable? How will we achieve that impact based on what we as an organization are best positioned to do? What specific priorities and work will we focus on? What resources, financial, human, or organizational, will we need to pursue this work? And finally, how will we know we are making progress? So all of these questions will be answered in a strategic plan. If you're working through that workbook that you have in front of you, or even if you're working through a different workbook or a different document, you should be able to answer these questions in a way that really gives yourself and your organization and the people that work within it a visibility into what they're working towards and how they're doing it. So one of the concepts that we want to dissect here is who to involve when we are talking about creating a strategy plan. You don't want to invite everybody that's involved in your organization if you have a 300-person organization. However, you don't want to have it so small that you're only involving the board members or you're only involving leadership. You really want to open it up so that you avoid what's called groupthink. And groupthink is when you get a small group of people who all think the same or all think alike, and you miss some big areas of opportunities because you're thinking about finances only, or you're thinking about operations only. You want to involve everybody who can represent a different department or a different team within your organization so that you can have a diverse group of stakeholders who are able to put together thoughts and ideas that can minimize risk and threats within your organization. So people should include board members, maybe not all of them, but a few of the board members who can provide good thought to how the board is thinking. Staff members from your different areas or different departments, including a representative or including those people who can give you an idea of how those departments are operating so that you could think about what to include in those areas of thought. And then key partners. If you have a fundraising consultant, or if you have a corporate sponsor who you want to make sure that you are working within their policies or within their train of thought, include them in your strategic planning so that you can get their ideas and their input to create a better strategy plan that will work as things change or as your community or your environments evolve and disrupt what you had a couple months ago. Now, if you do have questions, please feel free. Brianna's going to interrupt me if she has a question regarding something we have on the slide or coming up. So don't hesitate to add in your questions as we go through this. So when is the right time for a strategy plan? It's easy to say you should be doing it every year, you should be doing it every 6 months. But really what you should be thinking about is what's right for your organization. There are a few natural milestones that you should be thinking about of where to get started or where do you need to start with your strategy plan. And those places would be if your last strategic plan has ended. You've already created one, you've had it for the last 3 years, and it's ending because you designated 3 years was that point where you're going to reevaluate. Now is a good time to start a new strategy plan. Maybe there's a change in your environment. Whether it's your community or your funding landscape has changed, this is a good time to sit back with your team and say, okay, what do we need to think about as our environment changed? That could be the pandemic or quarantining. How do we get funding if we're not having people fly to communities across the world like Venture to Impact does? They had to rethink how things were changing. You might have had to done something similar where you needed to rethink your strategy of how you're going to get people involved or how you're going to impact your beneficiaries. If there's ever a change in your organization, whether it's new leadership or your team is growing exponentially, maybe it's time to sit back and think about how do you accommodate these changes within your strategy plan. Another good time is if there isn't a strong sense of direction. It could be that you've taken on too much and you feel like your organization is trying to do too many initiatives and you're not feeling progress because you have so much on your plate. This could be a good time to step back, get your stakeholders involved and put together a good strategy plan so that you all can focus on the most important priorities of your organization. Now, this is also a good time if you aren't feeling your full potential is being achieved. Again, this could be because you've taken on too much, or maybe it's been 10 years since you did your last strategy plan and you have a great mission, but you just don't feel you're making progress. Go ahead and take a time out and think about the strategy that you're working on, get your stakeholders involved and start talking about how to move forward in an actionable way. So if you already have a strategy plan, should you start all over because you sat in this webinar? No, don't start all over if you have something in place already. Consistency is really important when you are working with multiple stakeholders or multiple volunteers or staff within your organization. Maintain what you already have, but maybe build upon it. Maybe reevaluate it and look at where your gaps are, look at what's missing in your strategy plan, and maybe build on what you already have so you don't take out what's already working and try to put in something new that will cause a lot of headache if you're trying to teach people new ideas or new concepts. And then once you've started your strategic planning, when is a good time to reevaluate or reassess your plan? Well, again, it's hard to tell you that there's a best practices for the times that you should do it, but you should really evaluate what's best for your organization and what makes sense. So whether it's monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, or annually, you got to think about how many stakeholders are involved that you're needing to get. What are their calendars looking like? If you're getting 20 people in one room, are you going to be able to do that on a monthly basis? Probably not. You might want to look at semi-annually or annually to reassess. But if you are a smaller group and you want to make sure that you're making progress, maybe it makes sense for 3 stakeholders to sit in a room and look at it monthly. Or maybe it's the leadership of each team needs to sit down and reassess their team's efforts on a monthly basis. Each organization is going to be very different, so you need to understand what makes sense for you and your organization and how you can do this in a way that's practical without overwhelming people with too many meetings or too many conversations about strategic planning. All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of how do we create a strategic plan. Well, you probably already got a lot of the things that we're going to discuss. If you're an established nonprofit organization, you probably have a mission statement. You might have a vision statement. So if you're overwhelmed with the thought of putting together a document that has all of your strategies and plans for the next 5 years, don't worry. You've got a lot of these things already. It's just a matter of consolidating them and putting them in a place and in a format that your stakeholders and your teams can really understand and understand clearly, so that way they can implement it. So what do you need to have in your strategic plan? Well, the elements of an effective strategy plan are a vision statement, a mission statement, core values, a SWOT analysis, goals and key performance indicators, which are called KPIs, as abbreviated in a lot of the rest of this deck, and then tactics, which are your actionable items. These 6 items are really important to have in any strategic plan because it's going to tell your teams or your audience where you're at today, where you're wanting to go, how you're going to do it, and what items you need to be looking at, whether it's opportunities or threats, and then the goals and the tactics you're going to use to achieve your vision. So we'll walk through each of these and give you an idea of what items should be in your strategy plan. So we're going to start here. Again, if you're an established organization, you probably already have a vision statement and a mission statement. But for those who don't already have these, a vision statement explains your organization's vision and where you want to be in the future, where a mission statement defines your organization's purpose, its objectives, and its approach to reach those objectives. And to make it a little bit more simple, because they look so similar on paper. Sorry about that, skipped ahead. A vision statement is the ideal state, where your mission statement is today and how you are operating in today's world. So if you want to look at it, the vision is the future statement, where the mission statement is today's statement. And if you don't already have these, in the workbook, there are some worksheets that will help you build out your vision statement. And this is going to work through your vision of the ideal state, the organization's path will look like, and this is where you enter in your trajectory of your organization, and then metrics of success. So if you want to work through that to clarify your vision statement or even write a new one, feel free to do that so that you can have a vision statement that really works for your organization today. Same thing for the mission statement. In the workbook, you're going to have a worksheet that has some activities for you to think about so that you can put answers that will allow you to build a mission statement that defines your organization's purpose and objectives. So core values. Core values are the highest values that will guide your actions, unite staff and volunteers, and define your brand. So there's 6 things to think about when you are looking at core values. Core values should represent who you are at your best. So this isn't just aspirational. This is going to be how your organization works and looks like on the best day. You know, when things aren't going chaotic, when you don't have 20 people running around with their heads cut off, what is somebody going to be able to say about your organization if they come in and you all are doing what you're supposed to be doing, when and where you're supposed to be doing it? What is a stranger going to say about your organization that are all the positives? So think about that and think about what you do differently than any other organization. Another one is your leaders should be the true exemplars of your core values. So while everybody wants to have these very great values, really think about how your leaders are naturally operating so you can align those values to your organization, and your leaders can show the rest of the team how to be part of your organization. Core values should serve as your North Star. So as you put down your core values, these ideas should help you make decisions, whether you're under challenging circumstances or trying to define next year's goals. These core values should really drive you in the direction that you need to be going as an organization. Your core values should be your own. You can go on Google and search core values and get a million different core values to put in your organization. But that's not necessarily the right way to do it. You really need to think about your organization, what makes you unique and special, and why would somebody want to work with you? Well, these are your core values that you should be highlighting so that your staff and volunteers or anybody who's coming into your organization understands what those are and what sets you apart from other organizations. And that leads into core values should be differentiating. Again, as you're thinking about a like organization or an organization that you want to be like, it's not necessarily the right thing to do to copy their core values so that you could be more like them. Think about what the wow factor is in your organization and implement those as your core values so that you could set your organization apart from other organizations in your industry. And then you really need to think about spending time to teach and enforce your core values. So it's one thing to write all your core values down, post them around your office and your headquarters. But it's another one to spend the time to ensure that your staff and volunteers can embrace those core values and live and breathe them as they're working within your facilities or within your mission. So you need to dedicate the time to not only drafting core values and having them represent your organization, but ensuring that everybody within your organization understands them and can really demonstrate them as they're operating under your organization. So Brianna, how are we doing? Do we have any questions regarding mission or vision statements or core values so far?
Tracy, there have not been any questions in the chat, so I think we're doing good.
Okay. Again, if you have anything, please post and we'll get them addressed. Next up is a SWOT analysis. This is where your organization is going to look at your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. So in your workbook, there's a tab where you're going to be able to list out all of these different items. What do you think your strengths are? What are your weaknesses? What are the opportunities? These are external factors of where you see opportunities that your organization can succeed. What are the threats? What are things that could potentially harm your organization? Again, these are external things, whether it's a competing organization taking away volunteers or funding, or maybe you don't have an online presence. These are things that you should identify. And if you put it in your SWOT analysis, then you could build your goals and tactics accordingly so that you can highlight your strengths and opportunities and then examine your weaknesses and threats and then create action plans and tactics that can either help minimize those weaknesses or threats or highlight your opportunities and succeed in those efforts.
Tracy, before you continue, we have a good question here. Should your mission and vision be reviewed each time you do a strategic plan or as the organization grows and evolves?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to answer that without actually answering it. Your vision statement is something that you want to see in the future. So if you create a vision statement, let's say in 2019, you have this great vision statement, and you worked over the last 2 years to get to that place, it's a good time to reevaluate your vision statement and understand if you need to build on it, evolve it, or change it, because your future has become the now, and you're now looking to another future, or you're now looking to grow. Same thing with your mission. Mission statements are something that you don't necessarily want to change every year or every couple of years, because this is how your organization is working and operating in today's environment. So that's something that you would want to evaluate with your vision. If you've become your vision or your ideal state, yes, maybe it's time to reevaluate that vision and that mission statement so that you can build on it or adapt it to how you've changed. But you don't necessarily want to sit down every 6 months and rewrite these vision and mission statements, because then you're just going to be going in circles, constantly changing your priorities or constantly changing your goals, which is not a good idea to get your staff or your team to follow your focus, because it's going to be all over the place. So I would say revisiting your vision and mission statements are something that you need to think about critically and understand, is it necessary because you have changed as an organization and you've grown as an organization, or are you changing it because you don't like a couple words or don't like a couple things in it? That might not be a great time to change it. Maybe just adapt it. Does that answer the question?
I see a thank you, so I think so. And then we have another question. How do you integrate an organization's project into forming an organization's mission and vision statement?
So like an individual project that is not necessarily the greater organization. Is that what is being asked?
That's how I would understand the question.
Okay. So you could absolutely have a strategic plan for an individual project that encompasses the vision or the mission of the greater organization. The great things about this strategy plan or the workbook that we provide is it doesn't necessarily need to be for the larger organization. If you work on a smaller team, you can create your own strategy plan of how you're going to work under the larger organization or work under the organization's mission and vision statement. So if you are looking at a smaller entity, whether it's a team or whether it's a project, make sure you do capture some of the larger organization's mission or vision. And then that way you can trickle it down to your project. So you're not working in a silo, but you're actually working under the organization's mission, but your smaller mission for that project is going to be more geared towards what you're working on, and able to adapt those goals accordingly.
Thanks, Tracy.
Sure. So again, the SWOT analysis is really important to have, just to be able to look at how you're going to tie your goals and tactics into your current organization's state. So you want to have that done, which would then take us into goals and KPIs. So goals help a nonprofit reach its mission one step at a time, so that you're able to deliver on your mission and you're able to build up to your vision. So without these goals, you're not building out a roadmap of tactics or action items that you're able to do that could deliver your vision. So one thing to consider when building out goals is to really think about the SMART goals. And this is a specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And so as you're thinking about your goals, really ask these questions. What do you want to do? How will you know when you've reached your goal? Is it in your power to accomplish it? Can you realistically achieve it? And when exactly do you want to accomplish it? So as you're thinking your goals, in our worksheet, there is a SMART question so that you can see these as you're building them out. And as far as KPIs, these are items that you're going to want to show your success. So these create a way to identify the metrics of if you're achieving your goals. So those KPIs should really fall in line with your overall goals. And when you are thinking about goals, you're going to want to think about them in terms of timing, whether it's the long-term goals to achieve your vision, which could be 3 to 5 years out, your midterm goals, which are going to focus on action items that take a little bit longer to achieve because of external factors. And those would be 6 to 24 months or maybe a year to 3 years that you're going to look at your midterm goals. And then your short-term goals are the easier, more achievable goals that don't necessarily have the external factors that are tied into long-term or midterm goals. And these are going to be about 1 to 6 month term goals that you'd be able to jot down. You're going to be able to scratch them off because you're building out a social media content library, or you're doing something that is just a matter of doing it versus having a fundraising event that might be 6 months out and you're wanting to wait until that is accomplished to achieve your goals. So think about your goals in that way as you're creating your SMART goals. What are the long-term, what are the midterm, and what are the short-term goals that you're trying to achieve? And what are those KPIs that you're using to measure your success on those goals? Any questions on goals or KPIs? All right. So tactics, as you're building out your goals, you're going to notice that a lot of things come up in your conversations, either in your own head or with your stakeholders who are at the table with you. Your goals, you're going to say like, oh, well, in order to achieve that, we could do this. We could think about this in order to do this quarter's goals, or next month, we'll be able to do this if we do that. These are tactics. These are the action items that need to be accomplished in order to achieve your goal. So they're one and the same. As you're building out those goals, don't lose sight of those action items that you're thinking about in order to achieve those goals. And there might be other things that play into your goals that you might not necessarily highlight in conversation, but in order to achieve 1 million followers on Instagram, you might need to put in place some additional tactics that aren't so easy to identify in an hour-long conversation. So think about your goals, get them on paper, and then you're going to be able to fill out your tactics, your action items. As you think through your SMART goals, then you're going to be able to see what comes out for those actionable items. And then ultimately, you're going to put those into a roadmap, which are going to be able to give your team direction on when and where they should be doing it. And you're going to be able to assign these tactics out to the appropriate team or the appropriate teammate to accomplish these goals, which ultimately will be able to deliver on your vision. Any questions on goals or tactics? All right. So we're going to move right into some strategic planning tools. And this is a good place to ask some questions, because again, these are just a few of a lot of tools that we've put together to help build out your strategic plans. And a couple of these I've used in my day-to-day working with different organizations. And so I'll speak to you a little bit about how I've conducted these tools, or how I've used these tools to conduct a strategic planning session. The first is the Vista. And Vista stands for Vision, Strategy, and Tactics. It's the first couple letters of each of those words. And this is essentially a framework that can give a team a visual for organizing tactics that will deliver on your vision. So I like to think of this as, a mountain. You have to build that foundation in order to get to that middle section of the mountain, which ultimately gets you to the top of the mountain, which gives you vision of what you've accomplished, or vision of what you've done. So as you're building out your vision, you're going to want to see yourself on the top of the mountain. But how are you going to do that? What are the tactics and the strategies that you need to get there in order to see the top of the mountain? And with that, I have a little worksheet that I've used, which I usually start at the bottom. I usually start at the top with our vision. So we've already written our vision, so we include that there. And I don't look at the strategies quite yet. I go down to the tactics, and I start putting in different tactics that we've thought about as we're talking through our goals. And then you'll start to see a trend. So let's say our vision is we want to provide homes for 100 community members in our state or our province. So that's a very big vision that we're wanting to do in the future. So what are the tactics that we're going to need to do? And as we start thinking about that, okay, well, we need property to develop, and we need supplies to develop. So you could start seeing, all right, those could be one strategy of the actual physical needs of our vision. And we also need to get some governmental support. We need to be able to get permits passed. We need to be able to work with local officials to have support with either security or protection in our property and our builds. So that might be another strategy that you start seeing these tactics fall into. And the third might be funding. All right, well, we have a building and we have properties that we can start building on. We got the permits passed. All right, well, now we need the funding. We need donors. So what are we going to do for fundraising? And that would be your third strategy. So you really jump around this worksheet where you have your vision already set, and then you start lumping your you start lumping your tactics into buckets that are similar. That maybe one team can focus on strategy 1 and another team can focus on strategy 2. Another would focus on strategy 3. And then that way your strategies are developed based on those buckets or based on how you're going to achieve it. And you start building out your strategies of how to do it. You hand it off to the team that's responsible for delivering on it. And all of a sudden you have a Vista. You have that foundation of all the things that you're wanting to do to get to that middle point on the mountain, which ultimately takes you to the top to deliver on your vision. And I've done this many times with large organizations, multiple stakeholders of all types. And it's been really successful in getting everybody to really focus on these 3 items versus focusing on all the many things that everybody wants to talk about, whether it is funding, whether it is operations, or who's going to be responsible for what. stop talking about that. Let's just think about the tactics, which are ultimately going to put us into buckets of strategies, which then we can delve out the responsibilities or how we're going to act on these things. I'm very comfortable with the Vista. It's very easy to deliver. And so I recommend it for anybody who's not necessarily an expert on strategic planning, because it's a simple framework in which you can get a bunch of people in one room to start talking about 3 simple ideas versus many ideas, which other frameworks provide. Any questions or thoughts on Vista and how you would deliver it in your organization? Anything in chat, Brianna?
Nope.
All right.
We have loved the framework as a comment. So
Okay, good. And we're running right on time and ahead of time. So we'll keep trucking along, and maybe we can have some questions at the end. So roadmaps. You want to create a calendar view of your tactics and even strategies, so that everybody in your organization can see the same visual that a project manager or a coordinator would be seeing. So a roadmap is something that you would include in your strategic plan, so that everyone is looking at a calendar view of what are the things that we need to accomplish and the dates that we need to accomplish. I've created in my own work this one back here. And usually I do anywhere from 12 to 24 months of just in an Excel sheet, putting things together. And if I know projects are going to take 2 to 3 months, I'll highlight those across those 3 months so that you could see that it's a long tactic versus a short one, which may only take a month or a couple weeks. And then that way everyone has a visual. And then you're going to be able to identify overlaps or even risks in we have too much going on in May, or we have too much going on at the end of the year with Christmas coming on or holidays coming on. And we don't necessarily want to try to do all those things when we know people are going to be out of the office. So this roadmap will give you a view so that then you can identify the threats or the risks that come up when putting tactics into actionable plans. Another thing that you'll want to do is highlight who's responsible for the different tactics. Again, whether it's a team or an individual, you're going to want to distinguish who's supposed to be doing what. That way things don't get dropped or people are confused on what they should be doing versus what another team's doing. So really give your roadmap a colorful or visual view of this is what's happening in these months and these are who are responsible for it. With my Vista, I like to apply the strategies in different segments here. So then that way we can really see if we're assigning it to a team or a department. And strategy 1 is going to go to finance team. They know what bucket they need to be looking at as we go through it, as we revisit it every few months. The finance team is going to be able to see that they have all these things that they need to be accomplishing in a 12-month span. Another thing to think about is foundational. So you may only have 3 strategies, but there's going to be items that go across all the strategies or across all the concepts that you're going to want to highlight, so that you could say everybody needs to be working on these things, or the executive team needs to be working on these things versus the different departmental teams working on the different strategies. So it's okay to make your roadmap fit your organization with different colors or different segments as you see fit. And there are different tools that are going to help you build out a calendar view. For instance, you can go to Lucid Chart, you can go to Trello, you can go to so many different project management tools to create a calendar view that makes sense. And again, consistency is important with these roadmaps, because if you're changing it every couple of weeks or every month, people aren't going to understand what they're looking at, and you might not spend enough time on doing those action items versus spending time explaining to people what they're looking at. So again, find something that works for your organization, educate your team on how to understand it, and then stick with it so that people can deliver on those tactics that are assigned to them. Any questions? All right.
There were a couple, but I was able to answer them in the chat, Tracy.
Great. So here are some other tools to help in your planning session. Use a timer to give everyone a chance to speak, but not dominate. Anytime you get a bunch of people, especially leaders in a room, you're going to see that a few of them will take over the conversation, and that's just their natural personality, or that's just natural in a room of leaders. So using a timer, whether it's a clock or you actually put a timer in front of people to say you get 2 minutes to talk, will give everyone the ability to provide input without having that one or two people who tend to talk the most dominate the conversation and eliminate some of the quieter or more introverted people from participating in the conversation. And then another one is set a location at a neutral site. Again, you might have a board member who has a great home to host a strategic planning session, or you might have a headquarters and a boardroom that you could fit 5 people in, but maybe not 10 people in, and you want to invite 10 people. Look at neutral sites that will allow everyone to feel comfortable participating, gives everybody the same vantage point, whether it's all sitting at a table or all sitting in a room together. And sometimes that's not as hard as it seems with Zoom and some web options. Give everybody a place that they feel comfortable communicating and talking and providing input, so that you avoid that groupthink of having a select few who feel like they can give their point of views better than others. So think about a neutral site for that. And share a physical document upon completion. These are a lot of work. They're a lot of work for good reason. You have your vision, you have your mission, you have your SWOT and your goals and tactics in this strategic plan. And it's overwhelming because you have this huge document that has so much content in it. And it might feel like it's always evolving or always changing. But it's really important that everybody has access to the plan when you come out of a strategic planning session. If there's things that need to be changed or updated, you're able to put in a note that says this is a working document or this is draft, but make sure everyone has it so that when it comes time to communicating it out to the wider organization, people know what they've already seen and they understand what they've been looking at for a couple months. It's going to help you in the long run to be able to organize and communicate your plan versus holding it off, sharing it until you feel like it's done or ready to share out. Any questions on these considerations? And last but not least, tools for strategic planning are endless. You can go on the web and find so many different templates. You can find different methods for delivering a planning session. And you could read millions of books that give you ideas of how to conduct a strategic planning session. It's great if you want to research and do things and establish your own way of doing that. Just be consistent in how you're delivering it. We want to encourage you to find something that works for your organization so that you can deliver your message and create actionable tactics that everyone could work off of. But just make sure that it works for your whole organization and it's consistent. If you end up having to change things or evolve things because your environment changed or your leadership changed, yes, change it. But make sure that you aren't scrapping everything that you've done in the past that everybody's already learned, and think about how you could build on what you already have, improve it, whether it's visually or with the content, and make sure that everyone understands how it's changing. And then that way you're able to really focus on the vision and the execution of your plan versus the formatting or the ever-changing content that's inside of it. Brianna, anything you want to add to this? I know that you and I talked quite a bit about this. Anything you'd want to add to highlight the importance of organizing your strategic plan?
Just with the tools, I would say if you do change your tool, just think also about how do you take your team through essentially like orientation of how to use the new tool so that they understand. That was the main thing that came to mind.
Yeah. So finally, a strategic plan will set your organization up to deliver on your vision and mission. Embrace the journey and learn from your discovery. It is a lot of work. Do expect to spend many hours on this with your stakeholders. It's not a one and done thing where you can spend an hour brainstorming ideas and you're going to have a marvelous strategic plan. It is something that you're going to want to put thought into. You're going to want to encourage multiple hour-long sessions so that you could really build out your strategic plan. You're going to learn a lot about your team. You're going to learn a lot about your organization and where everyone's wanting to go. So get that into your strategic plan. Highlight the diversity of your organization and how it operates, and build out a strategy plan that everyone can deliver on. And then that concludes what we have. So Brianna, I don't know if you have anything you want to contribute or add to the strategic planning guide.
Yes, thanks, Tracy. So I was just going to note for you, we have a request for like a completed example of a strategic plan. So I let everybody know that we can send that out after our meeting. But yes, before we get to closing, we do have some time. So just wanted to see if anybody had some questions before we wrap up. We recognize that, an hour is not a lot of time to dig into strategic planning, which was one of Tracy and I's challenges, as well as, we feel like there could be so many traps you can run into or different things that arise. But does anybody have any questions they want to ask before we wrap up? Yes, we are recording the session and we will share it via email for access later.
Well, 10 minutes early, Brianna. I think that's a record for me.
Okay, well, if there are not any questions, I do want to let you all know that we are having 2 more training sessions in the next couple of months. We have one about connecting with CSR, corporate social responsibility, and one on grant writing that will be coming up. So keep an eye on your email so that you can join for those sessions as well. As we mentioned, we will follow up with an email that'll include the recording, the workbook, a copy of the deck, and an example for you to see a completed version. And then if you have any questions or want to connect with Venture to Impact, I believe you all have our website, venturetoimpact.org. And there's a For Partners section which I think would be most interesting to most of you. Yes, I think that's it, unless somebody has thought of a question.